My name is Rachel Morgan, and I am 33 years old. And right now, a federal judge is standing at the end of my mother's dining table with a champagne flute in his hand, making a toast that was supposed to be about my brother's engagement. But it's turned into my cross examination instead. He has just stopped walking right in front of my chair, and every conversation in the room has snapped shut like a door. A minute ago, he was talking about family and honesty, and how trust is the foundation of everything. My mother was glowing. My brother was grinning. His fiancée was looking at him like he hung the moon. Now, the judge looks down at me and says, in this calm courtroom voice that carries all the way to the kitchen, I have to say, I am surprised to see you here. His eyes do not move. They stay locked on mine. Then he asks the one question that rips my family story in half. Who are you to them exactly? The room freezes. Forks stop halfway to mouths. Even the air feels like it is holding its breath. My mother lets out this thin, high laugh and tries to jump in with some smooth line about me being her daughter who does simple office work up in the city. But the judge does not look at her. He is still watching me like he already knows the answer and just wants to see if I will lie. And under that stare, my brain flashes back to 1:30 this morning when my phone lit up on my nightstand and my father said, tomorrow, you can come to dinner with your brother's future in-laws, but keep your mouth shut. And my mother's voice came sharp in the background. Her dad is a federal judge. Do not embarrass us the way you always do. I said, got it, and thought I could swallow myself for one more night. Now, the very man they were so desperate to impress is waiting for my answer. And I know whatever I say next will either keep their house of lies standing or burn it to the ground. Before I tell you what he said and what happened after I walked out, tell me, what time is it for you right now? And where are you watching from? I'm curious to see how far this story will travel. To understand how I ended up being the girl my own parents were afraid to claim in front of a judge, you have to understand the mantle test. That is what I started calling it in my head when I was 7 years old, standing in our living room in Riverside, Indiana, staring at the shelf over the fireplace. There were 6 framed photos up there. 5 of my little brother at different ages in different uniforms. T-ball, soccer, church Christmas play, birthday party with a frosting smeared grin, and one of me. A stiff school picture where my front teeth were too big for my face. My photo was jammed behind a chunky ceramic angel and a fake ivy plant. You had to lean left and crane your neck to even see my eyes. That day, I dragged a dining chair over, climbed up, and slid my own picture out from behind the leaves. I put it dead center between 2 of my brothers. Then I climbed down and waited. The next afternoon, when I got home from school, the chair was back at the table and my photo was back behind the ivy. That was the first mantle test. After that, I stopped moving the picture and started moving myself. Every time my mother erased me, I raised the stakes. When my brother made the all-star team, I told myself, if I came home with straight A's, maybe my picture would move out from behind the plant. When he hit a game-winning double, I decided if I became valedictorian, maybe my mother would brag about me to someone, anyone. Instead, I graduated second in my class, and my mother skipped the ceremony to sit on a metal bleacher watching my brother warm the bench for a regional playoff. She called later and said they almost put him in, like that was the real headline. I took my full ride to University of Illinois, packed everything into my rusty Civic, and drove the 3 hours to Chicago with my father's hug still stiff on my shoulders and my mother's parting words in my ear. Do not go getting any ideas above your raising. At college, I fell in love with words and records and the rush you get when you crack something open that people in power hoped would stay shut. I became the kid who stayed in the student newsroom until 3 o'clock in the morning, chasing leads for stories no one thought mattered until they blew up on the front page. After graduation, I clawed my way into an entry-level job at a Chicago paper, the Tribune, fetching coffee and fact-checking other reporters' copy until someone finally let me chase my own piece about a landlord who was letting kids live with mold and rats. That story led to inspections and fines and a grudging, "You did good," from my editor. I called my mother that night, bursting to tell her. She cut me off before I finished the first sentence and asked if I had heard how many points my brother had scored in his rec league game. I still tried the mantle test from a distance. Every promotion, every award, every pay raise. I thought, maybe this time she will see me. Maybe this time she will put my picture where people can actually find it. Instead, she told the neighbors that I had dropped out of school because the city was a bad influence and that I was working some little office job to make ends meet. She never said what office because that kept it vague enough for her to bend it any way she needed. I know, because one Thanksgiving, I sat in the kitchen refilling coffee while the woman across the street asked my mother if I was still struggling with that depression thing. I had never been diagnosed with anything. My mother just lifted her eyes in this tragic way and said, "She is very private. We do not talk about it." I scrubbed the same coffee stain for 3 full minutes so I would not march in and scream. Instead, I kept driving back for holidays, kept calling every Sunday, kept sending birthday cards with little notes my mother never mentioned. I was the kid who kept running the mantle test with my whole life, hoping one day I would come home and see my own face front and center, hoping love would eventually outweigh the story my mother liked better. Let me tell you about my brother and the story my mother built around him like a glass case. My brother, Tyler, is 4 years younger than me. Broad smile, easy laugh. The kind of man strangers describe as a good guy after knowing him 5 minutes. He sells used cars at a big lot off the interstate outside Indianapolis. Nothing wrong with that. It is honest work. But in my mother's mouth, it turns into something else entirely. To hear her tell it, he is a regional sales director for a major automotive group who is on the verge of being promoted to corporate. She tells the ladies at church that he manages dozens of people and is flown out to conferences. My favorite was the time she told her book club he had closed a multi-million-dollar fleet deal with the state. I only found that out because one of those women messaged me on social media to say how proud I must be of my baby brother. Meanwhile, Tyler still lives 15 minutes from our childhood house, has a supervisor who schedules his shifts, and sends me texts asking if I know anyone who needs a decent minivan. The first time I heard my mother inflate his title in front of me, I laughed because I thought it was a joke. "Mom, that is not his job. He is a salesperson." She shot me this look and said, "It sounds better this way. Why do you always have to be so negative?" Slowly, it sank in that for her, the issue was not what was true. It was what sounded good. And nothing about my life fit the picture she wanted on display. I do not have a husband or children. I live in a one-bedroom apartment in the city with a dying ficus and a stack of reporter notebooks on the counter. My job as an investigative reporter means long hours, public hearings, and poking into the kind of secrets polite people pretend not to see. There is no way to spin that into something that makes you look like the perfect small-town mother. So, she spun something else. She built an Instagram account that might as well have been called Mom of the Golden Sun. Photo after photo of Tyler in a suit at a dealership event. Tyler holding a plaque with a sales award. Tyler grilling burgers in our backyard while she wrote captions about how hard he worked for his team. I scrolled through over 2 years of posts one night while I sat alone on my couch after filing a story about corruption in the city housing department. I had just gotten word that my reporting was being nominated for a national award. My name did not appear once on her page, not even in the background of a Christmas photo. Just my elbow cropped out of frame here and there. On a weak impulse, I tapped a heart on one of the posts and commented, "Love seeing him happy." She deleted the comment within an hour. The only reason I know is because I checked back in a moment of self-loathing and found nothing. It was like I had tried to step into the picture and she had gently pushed me back out. Last year, my paper gave me the green light to dig into a series of police shootings in a nearby city. I spent 8 months buried in body cam footage, court transcripts, and records requests. I sat through every day of a civil trial where the family of a teenager sued the department. The federal judge on that case was the same man who would later stand in my mother's dining room. Back then, he was just the sharply focused figure in a black robe at the front of the courtroom, but he noticed me. He watched me take notes, watched me wait in the hallway for lawyers and families. After the verdict, he spoke on a criminal justice panel, and my editor made me cover it. When the room cleared, he stopped me on his way out and said, "Ms. Morgan, your series was some of the most thorough reporting I have seen on this issue. It takes courage to hold a system like that to the light." Then he shook my hand and kept walking. I stood there clutching my notebook like it was an anchor, wanting to call my mother and tell her that a federal judge had just praised my work. I did not. The last time I tried to tell her about a big story, she had responded with, "Honey, nobody wants to hear about all that depressing stuff. Anyway, did I tell you Tyler might get a company car?" So I tucked that compliment away in the same quiet place I kept every win she did not want to see, never imagining that the judge and my family would collide around one dining table. The call came on a Tuesday night, or technically Wednesday morning, because my phone lit up on the nightstand at 1:30, and for a second, I was sure someone had died. Nobody calls at that hour with good news. I fumbled it up to my ear and saw my father's name. His calls are rare enough in daylight. At that time, it felt like an emergency. "Dad, what is going on? Is everyone all right?" I sat up so fast, my heart was already pounding. His voice came through low and careful, like he was reading a script and did not want anyone to hear him mess it up. "Rachel, your brother and his fiancée are having her parents over for dinner Friday. Your mother says you can come." Can, not should. Not "we want you here." I exhaled and tried to slow the adrenaline. "Okay, sure. I can make that drive after work." Then in the background, I heard my mother's tone, sharp even through the speaker. "Did you tell her? Did you?" My father cleared his throat. "Your mom wants you to understand a few things. Her dad is a federal judge. It is a big night for Tyler. We want to make a good impression." My mother's voice cut in full force. "Rachel, you can come, but you need to keep your mouth shut about your job. Do you understand me?" I stared at the dark ceiling like it might give me patience. "Why?" "Because this dinner is about your brother, not you. You have that reporter thing, and your stories upset people. I do not want any of that at my table. Just tell them you work in an office in Chicago. Do not go into it. You know how you are." I knew exactly how I was. I was the kid who got told I was making a scene anytime I did something that could not be turned into a brag about my brother. Even when I was 6, that scene was as small as talking for too long about the book I was reading. I clenched my jaw so tight my teeth hurt. "Mom, my work is not a scandal. It is my career. It is what I do." She snorted like I had just told a joke that annoyed her. "You always have to make things difficult. Do not embarrass us in front of important people. You think they want to hear about some crime stories from the city?" There it was, plain. Not that she was proud and awkward about showing it, but that she was ashamed and wanted it hidden. I could have argued. I could have said, "You know that important person has personally thanked me for my reporting." I could have said, "I am 33 years old, and I am not going to lie about what I do, so you can pretend I am smaller than I am." Instead, I lay there in the dark, with morning deadlines already circling my brain, and heard myself say, "Fine." My father let out this relieved sigh and said, "We will see you Friday, kiddo," like he had just dodged a bomb. When the line went dead, I rolled onto my back and stared at the hairline crack in my bedroom ceiling. The mantle test had followed me all the way to Chicago, and I was still failing it. Friday, I clocked out at the Tribune a little early, traded my usual jeans and press badge for dark jeans, a navy blouse, and the blazer I had worn on stage the night I accepted that national award for the police shooting series. I had not planned to. I had reached for it on habit, but as I slid my arms into the sleeves, I realized why it felt right. It was my armor. A quiet reminder that whatever story my mother told in that house, I knew who I really was. The drive from the city to Riverside is just under 3 hours, if the traffic gods are kind. Cornfields, billboards, truck stops, and long stretches of highway, thin as a string. Usually, I fill it with podcasts and coffee. That day, I drove in silence, replaying years of small edits and outright lies. The time a neighbor told me she was sorry my writing had not panned out when I had just been promoted. The time my aunt squeezed my arm at Thanksgiving and whispered, "Your mother says you are still struggling, but we are praying for you." Like my independence and my career were an illness that might clear up if I just came home and worked at the bank. Halfway there, I pulled into a gas station and stared at myself in the reflection of the window while the tank filled. High cheeks from my father's side, my mother's gray eyes, the blazer sitting on my shoulders like a secret. I tried to picture walking into that house and saying, "I refuse. I am not doing this." Then I heard my brother's laugh from 1,000 childhood afternoons when I read to him while he colored at my feet. And I thought, one quiet dinner, that is all this has to be. I can swallow myself for one night to make things easy for him. What I did not realize yet was that it would not stay my secret for long. I pulled into my parents' driveway an hour before anyone else was due. The house looked exactly like it had since I was a teenager. Same shutters, same wind chimes, same wreath my mother swapped out every season like a stage set. She opened the door before I even knocked. Hair sprayed into place, lipstick perfect, eyes already scanning me from head to toe to see if I matched the story she planned to sell. "You are early," she said. Not a hello or a hug then. "Come in. We need to walk through a few things." She moved through the house like a director setting marks, gesturing at chairs, glasses, plates. "She will sit here, her parents there. Your brother at the head. I will be here. You can sit down there." She pointed to the far corner of the long table where a single place card with my name waited quietly away from the center. I almost laughed because, of course, even the dinner geometry kept me on the edge. "Mom," I said, at least trying, "are you really going to introduce me as someone who does generic office work?" She straightened a napkin that did not need straightening and said, "Rachel, you are so dramatic. No one cares what you do. They just need to know you have a job. Your brother is the one building a family here. Do not make this complicated." In the living room, my father sat in his recliner with the local paper held up, eyes glued to the sports section. Like if he did not look up, he could not be drafted into any argument. I remembered being 8 and asking him once why my mother never talked about my spelling bee trophies. He had patted my knee without taking his eyes off the television and said, "Your mom gets excited. Just let her talk." 30 seconds later, she had walked in and started another monologue about my brother's pitching arm. And the memory folded over the present like tracing paper. The doorbell rang and snapped the house into performance mode. My brother's fiancée came in first. Jessica, tall and warm, with the kind of open face that makes you feel like you can exhale. She hugged my mother, kissed my brother's cheek, then turned to me with her hand out. "You must be Rachel. He has told me so much about you. You live in Chicago, right? What do you do out there?" For one electric second, I could feel the answer on my tongue. The truth. The courtroom days, the late nights in the newsroom. Before I could open my mouth, my mother seemed to materialize at my shoulder, her nails grazing my arm just enough to pinch. "Rachel just does administrative work for a little office downtown," she said. "Nothing exciting. Now let me see that ring." She looped her arm through Jessica's and steered her toward the kitchen, her voice turning sugary as she cooed over the modest diamond. Jessica looked back at me once over her shoulder, eyes studying me like she could feel the seam, where my mother's sentence did not quite match my posture. The second doorbell came right on time. My brother stood straighter. My mother smoothed her blouse and opened the door with a warmth she saves for outsiders. In walked the judge and his wife. He was taller than he looked behind the bench. Silver hair, deliberate gaze. His wife, Elizabeth, had the composed presence of someone who had spent her adult life being introduced as Mrs. and still kept her own mind. My mother launched into handshakes and compliments. "So honored to have you. Come in. Welcome to our home. This is our son, Tyler." She put both hands on my brother's shoulders as if presenting a prize. Tyler shook the judge's hand with that charm that has always come easy to him. I saw the judge measure him, polite, neutral. Then my mother turned toward me, her tone changing almost imperceptibly. Lighter, faster, and this is our daughter, Rachel. She works in an office in Chicago, keeps busy, but nothing too intense. The judge took my hand, his palm warm, grip firm, his eyes locked onto my face, and stayed there one heartbeat too long. Morgan, he said slowly. Rachel Morgan. There was the flicker I had seen from the gallery seat, the way his brow tightens when a fact in front of him does not match the record in his head. My mother laughed too loudly. They have had such a long drive. Let us get everyone seated. She broke our handshake by steering him toward the table. But as he moved away, he glanced back at me. Not like a man who thought I looked familiar in that vague high school way, but like someone scrolling through a mental file. Dinner began with my mother in absolute command. She poured wine, refilled bread, and narrated my brother's supposed achievements in a steady stream. She is always telling us about the big accounts he handles. My father from the recliner said nothing, just relocated to his chair at the far end and applied himself to the roast. Every time I lifted my voice, even to say something innocuous. That salad dressing is really good, Mom. Or, the pork is cooked perfectly. She slid something in front of me to send me away from the conversation. Rachel, will you grab more ice? Rachel, could you check on the rolls? Rach, why do you not go see if the coffee is ready? The judge watched it all. His wife watched even closer. I caught Elizabeth noticing the way my mother redirected any question that drifted my direction. When Jessica tried again with, So, Rachel, do you like living in the city? I began. I love Chicago. My office is near. And my mother launched over me with, Speaking of cities, did we tell you Tyler might be going to Dallas for a conference? My words died mid-sentence. The judge's gaze sharpened just a fraction. Elizabeth set down her fork with a soft click. The table hum kept going, but something under it had changed. I could feel it in the way the judge's questions started circling me more directly, in the way my mother's laugh got thinner each time she batted them away. The whole night was starting to feel like the mental test with witnesses. The shift came when the judge lifted his glass and tapped it with his knife. The clear ring cut through my mother's story about Tyler's latest sales numbers and brought every head up. If I may, he said, I would like to say a few words. My mother practically sparkled. This was what she had been angling for since the first place card was written. Of course, she said, we would be honored. He stood, buttoned his jacket in that practiced way people in power have, and began to talk about family and character and what it means to trust the people you are about to join your life with. He spoke first to Jessica, telling her she had always had a talent for seeing people clearly, that it was a gift. Then to my brother, saying, I believe in second impressions as much as first ones. This dinner was meant to let us see each other. My brother smiled like he had just passed an exam. My mother's hand found my father's under the table. He sat rigid, letting her squeeze his fingers like she always did when she wanted him to act supportive. Then the judge began to walk slowly around the far side of the table as he talked, an old habit from his courtroom days, addressing the jury, making eye contact with each person. When he reached my corner, he stopped, turned toward me fully, and let the silence stretch just long enough that every eye followed his. I have to say, he repeated, and this time he let the weight of his words settle. I am surprised to see you here. My mother jumped in with her bright voice. Oh, Rachel's very private, but she is thrilled for her brother. We are all just so happy. He did not even glance at her. His gaze stayed steady on me. Who are you to them exactly? He asked, not unkind, but with the precise curiosity of a man who already knew the outline and was giving me a chance to fill in the blanks. My heart punched against my ribs. For a heartbeat, I considered doing what my mother had asked, shrinking, smiling, repeating her line about office work, and letting the moment slide past. But I remembered the way he had said, "Miss Morgan," in that courthouse hallway months ago. Remembered the stack of articles with my byline spread out on my editor's desk. Remembered the way my own name had never once crossed my mother's lips online, and I heard myself say, "I am their daughter and Tyler's sister, and I am an investigative reporter for the Chicago Tribune." The silence that followed had a different texture than the usual awkward pause. It was dense, loaded. My mother's chair scraped an inch. "You know," she said with a tight laugh, "Rachel plays around with some writing, but really she just does office work." The judge finally turned his head toward her, his expression blank, in the way that says everything. "Mrs. Morgan," he said to me, "your series on the Lakewood police shootings was some of the most important journalism I have seen in my courtroom. Your reporting was cited in 3 briefs in my case." I watched my mother's face crack like thin ice. Elizabeth inhaled sharply. Jessica looked from him to me with eyes wide. "My father told us your daughter did office work," Elizabeth said slowly, her voice level but cold. "Nothing about front-page investigations." My mother fumbled her napkin. "I did not want to make a fuss," she said. "Rachel does not like attention. I did not want to pressure her." Jessica turned fully toward my brother. "Is that true?" she asked. "You never told me your sister was that Rachel Morgan, the one whose articles we read in class. She is the reason we talked about that case in my nursing program." My brother swallowed, his face blotchy. "Mom did not want drama," he muttered. It came out small. The judge looked back at him. "Drama is when people lie and then have to live with the fallout, son. This is just the truth." He shifted his attention down the table. "And since we are clearing up titles, what exactly is your position at the dealership, Tyler?" My brother blinked, startled. "I am in sales," he said. My mother lunged. "He is a manager, practically a director. They lean on him for everything," she said, as if sheer insistence could turn the word true. My brother stared at his plate. "Tell them," Jessica said quietly. "Say the actual title on your pay stub." Every muscle in my mother's face tensed. "Tyler," she hissed, "do not be ungrateful." The judge raised one palm, that subtle courtroom gesture that brought entire proceedings to heel. "Let the man answer, Tyler," he said. My brother exhaled, like someone letting go of a lie that had gotten too heavy. "I am a senior sales associate," he said. "I do not manage anyone. The only thing I direct is where people sign." The room sank into a silence even thicker than before. Jessica pushed back her chair slowly, napkin folded with deliberate care. "I need some air," she said. My brother reached for her hand. "Jessica, wait. This is nothing. Mom just likes things to sound nice." She pulled back. "Likes things to sound nice?" she repeated. "Or likes to rewrite reality? Because there is a difference. And if you stood by while she erased your sister and lied to my parents about both of you, I need to understand what that says about you." "Jessica," my mother broke in, tears starting now, "I only did what any mother would. I wanted you to see our family at our best." Elizabeth stood, her chair legs screeching faintly. "No," she said. "Any mother might brag. Any mother might round up a detail. But what you did was erase one child to inflate another and then ask her to help you do it. That is not love. That is control." My father finally spoke, his voice rusty. "She is right," he whispered. Everyone turned toward him as if he were a piece of furniture that had suddenly started talking. "Patricia," he said to my mother, "you went too far." Tears streamed down my mother's cheeks now. Some performative, some from a real terror of losing the stories she had clung to for years. "I did this for you, Tyler," she said. "I wanted you to have a good life, good opportunities. Who would want to marry into a family where the daughter stirs up trouble and the son sells cars?" Jessica let out a sound that was almost a laugh and almost a sob. "You did not think a federal judge and a nurse could handle the idea that your daughter holds police accountable and your son has an honest job?" she asked. The judge reached into his pocket and pulled out a card. He walked the few steps to my corner and placed it by my plate. "If you ever want a reference for a panel or fellowship, Ms. Morgan," he said, "you have my number." In that moment, my mother's world finally tilted. The man she had been desperate to impress was not looking at her golden son or at her carefully arranged centerpiece. He was looking at the daughter she had tried her hardest to pretend did not count. Jessica straightened, wiped her eyes, and looked at my brother. "I cannot marry into this as it is," she said, "not unless something changes drastically. I am calling off the engagement." She pulled the ring off and set it carefully on the table runner in front of him. My mother's wail cut through the room. "You cannot do this," she cried. "You cannot ruin his life because his sister wanted a moment in the spotlight." I stood slowly, placing my napkin beside my plate with deliberate calm. "I did not want the spotlight," I said. "I wanted a seat at my own family's table where I did not have to lie about who I am." The judge and Elizabeth moved toward the entryway. Jessica followed, pausing only to look back at me. "Thank you for telling the truth," she said. My brother stared at me, eyes wild. "You just destroyed everything," he said, his voice cracking. "No," I replied. "I just refuse to keep helping Mom destroy me." Then I turned to my mother. "I love you, but this is the last night I will ever make myself small so you can feel big. If you want me in your life, it will be as I am, not as some dim version you find acceptable." She flinched like the words had landed physically. My father bowed his head. The judge held the door for his wife and future former daughter-in-law, and I picked up my blazer from the back of my chair and walked out of the house I grew up in without waiting for anyone to call me back. The drive back to Chicago that night was the strangest kind of quiet. Not the numb silence I used to feel after family holidays where I had smiled and swallowed and driven home with a headache. This was the silence after a building has finally been condemned and knocked down. You can still see the outline of what used to stand there, but the air feels cleaner without the weight of it. My hands shook on the steering wheel once I hit the interstate. All the adrenaline I had tamped down at the table finally getting permission to move through my body. I did not turn on the radio. I replayed every moment instead. The look on Jessica's face when she realized who I was. The way the judge's voice had stayed gentle but immovable. The crack in my father's voice when he finally told my mother she had gone too far. I pulled into my apartment garage close to midnight, locked the car, and carried my overnight bag upstairs without checking my phone. It stayed face down on the counter until morning when coffee and daylight made it feel safe enough to flip over. 12 unread messages lit the screen. My mother, in a rapid-fire stream from late evening. "You have destroyed your brother's future. Jessica left with them. The judge will never forgive us. I hope that career you love so much keeps you warm when you are alone. My brother, more scattered." Why could you not have just said you work in an office? It was one dinner. Mom has not stopped crying. Then a final one that stung more than I wanted to admit. "You always have to make everything about you." Dad had sent one at dawn. "I am sorry, Rach." That was all it said. 3 words more than I had ever heard him offer in person. Then there was a number I did not recognize with a local area code from back home. "Hi, Rachel. This is Jessica. I am so sorry about last night. I had no idea what your mother had told my parents about you. If you are willing, I would like to meet for coffee when I come back through the city. I want to hear your side, without anyone editing it." I stared at that message the longest. Something in my chest loosening for the first time in hours. We met 2 weeks later at a cafe near my office. She showed up in jeans and a sweatshirt, with her hair in a messy bun, looking more like a grad student than the poised woman from the dinner. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, hands wrapped around her mug. "My mother told your parents that I was unstable." "Did you know that?" I asked without preamble. She winced. "She implied you had issues and were not close to the family. She said the city had changed you and that it was better not to bring up complicated topics around you." My father was expecting someone fragile or volatile at that table. Instead, he saw the woman whose articles he had been quoting to his clerks, Tyler admitted later that he knew about the lies. Not all the details, but the gist. He shrugged it off as just how your mom is. I let the words land. That sentence, I said, is how bad behavior stays glued into families for generations. Just how they are. It is the most dangerous shrug in the world. Jessica nodded, eyes bright. I am not saying Tyler is evil, she said, but he has let your mom hide behind him for years, and he has been willing to let you take the cost. I asked her if she was really done with the engagement. She looked down at her hands. I told him I would consider trying again if he did real work. Counseling, boundaries, owning his part, she said. But I also told him I will not marry him unless he can stand up to his mother without asking you to lie for him. A month later, he called me himself, voice rough. I am starting therapy, he said. I do not know what I am doing, but I know I cannot keep pretending mom is harmless. He apologized not in a neat speech, but in messy fragments. For laughing when she dismissed my stories, for not telling Jessica the truth, for standing there at the table looking more angry at me than at the lies that had just detonated his future. My mother did what she always does at first. She went silent. For 6 weeks, there were no guilt-soaked messages, no passive-aggressive holiday group texts, just a quiet from Riverside that was not my doing, and for once did not feel like punishment. It felt like a system forced to shut down and reboot. The first break in it came in the form of a short text. I miss you. No accusations, no strings. I waited a day, then replied, I miss you too. But I will not come back into your house under the old rules. If you want me there, it has to be as your daughter, the reporter, not the imaginary office girl. She did not answer right away. In the meantime, life went on. I covered another case. I had dinner at the judge's house with him and Elizabeth when they invited me for what they called a do-over family meal. Jessica came too, not as Tyler's fiancée, but as herself. We sat at a round kitchen table. No head seat, no place cards. Elizabeth passed me the salad and at one point said, Rachel, in this house, you never have to pretend to be anyone but who you are. The sentence landed harder than some court rulings I have read. A simple statement that felt like the opposite of every mantle test I had ever run. About 3 months after the dinner, my mother called on a Tuesday afternoon while I was at my desk reviewing documents. I stared at her name as it buzzed, then answered. Mom. A long breath, then a smaller voice than I had ever heard from her. I do not know how to do this, she said, but your father says I should try starting with the truth. I wanted that night to make us look like a family worth marrying into, and I was terrified that if they knew who you really are, they would think less of us. It came out twisted. I stayed silent, let her sit in it. Finally, she said, I am sorry for lying about you. I am sorry for asking you to hide. I do not understand your world, but I should have asked you to explain it instead of pretending it did not count. It was not the grand public apology some part of me had dreamed about, not her standing up in church and confessing that she had erased me, but it was a crack in the wall I had thought might never shift. I told her, I will not accept being made small again, but if you are willing to learn a new way to be my mother, I am willing to try. A few weeks later, I drove back to Riverside for the first time since that disaster of a dinner. No big event, just a Saturday afternoon. My father met me on the porch and pulled me into an awkward hug that lasted 2 beats longer than usual. Inside, the first thing I noticed was the mantle. 6 photos still, but this time, my childhood picture was not behind the ivy. It was front and center next to Tyler's most recent shot. The plant had been moved to the side, crooked, like my mother had not quite known what to do with it. I stood there looking at that simple change and understood that this was as close as she could come right now to standing in front of a judge and saying, I was wrong. Later that night over meatloaf at the kitchen table, she asked, So, how does a story of yours go from an idea in your head to the front page? It was a basic question, the kind any parent might toss out lazily over dinner. For me, it felt like a door opening. I answered, step by step. And she listened without changing the subject, without redirecting to Tyler, without making my work sound like a cute hobby. Here is what I want you to take from all of this. If you have ever sat at a table where your own family treated you like an extra in their play, love that demands you shrink is not love. It is management. If someone needs you to lie about who you are so they can feel comfortable, they are not protecting you. They are protecting the story they tell about themselves. The night that Judge stood in front of me and asked who I was to my own family, I thought I might lose my mother for good if I answered honestly. What I lost instead was the role she had cast me in, the invisible daughter who keeps quiet so the golden child can shine. Roles can be recast. Boundaries are not walls, but doors. And you get to decide who walks through. If you are sitting at a table right now in your own life where the price of admission is making yourself small, ask yourself who taught you that was the cost of belonging and whether they have actually earned that much power over you. And if you could say one sentence to the person who tried to make you small, what would it be? I hope you write it down somewhere, even if they never hear it, because the first person who needs to know you are done shrinking is you.